Red Roses by Cyrus Emerson. This book is read by Kira Omans. Dedicated to Christina Bennett, author of Born of Courage. Prologue. Spring Equinox 1485. All winter had seen heavy rain along the northeast coast of England. The mud made planting difficult, and the oppression of Richard III's reign sapped the gospel from the pews. Word had travelled fast of his nephew's disappearances. The news soured souls. Yet, along the old road to York and to his Majesty, stood a priest ready to serve. His sweat-filled brow looked toward the sun, humid with a sudden rise in temperature. Not far off, along level ground, a carriage approached with horses labouring along the rutted road. War loomed on the horizon. Henry Tudor would be landing with his army in the south after sailing from France. He would make his challenge for the throne, and for the hearts of England. Only the priest served the White Rose and the House of York. Duty bound by oath and lands, he had been called upon by the king himself, who, sensitive of public opinion, wished to curry favour with God. The carriage stopped in Durham. The coachman speckled in mud splatter from horses' hoofs, his eyes tired and sunken. The priest walked toward him. "Hail, coachman, how goes thee?"
"Fine, sire, fine as things can be. We ride to York, only not tonight, thou shalt see. A long journey we have indeed."
"Thee say it true. Only many thoughts to ponder and prayers to be made. They say the king's of curved stature. What thee make of it, coachman? Speak without fear, for thee speak to God's ear, having never seen the king before."
"'Tis his spine, sire. None speak of it much when he's near. So why 'tis so, I've no idea. 'Tis of nature, though, of that I'm sure, for he moves well in combat, gaining respect from knights who serve."
"I see. Thank thee for thy report. I'll take my seat inside. Are there any other passengers?"
"Only a young maiden from up north. Like thou, priest, I don't know of her. I'm only to take thou to the king. Like I'm told, sire."
With that, the priest entered the carriage without looking at the doorman. Then the horses pulled them south. Chapter 1. As the carriage began to move with a bump, the young maiden across from the priest blurted out,
"Young maiden, a princess for sure. Lady of Berwickshire. Priest, 'tis nice to meet thou. Been on this ride before?"
"Haven't, although I've heard it told before. I'm as prepared for this journey as for a place in heaven. Lady of Berwickshire, that's in Scotland last I heard."
"On the border now in England. We are of English blood and faithful servants of the White Rose. I've never been this far south in my entire life. I'm a little scared, priest. Don't mean to burden thou with my feelings."
"Young lady, that's my charge on earth. We've a long carriage ride. Something seems wrong with all of this. A young lady and a priest from Durham called on special envoy by His Majesty. I've never met him before. Has a royal family visited thy family estate?"
"God, no. We are of some prominence in our village, yes. Granted lands, titles, and income. I'm to be married. Well, planned to be married. A little scandal, to be honest. We've some time, don't we?"
"Yes, we've some time. To continue, there's something wrong with all of this. War has been waging for many years. I've heard tales of Henry Tudor gaining ground. Rumours. What do I know from my small parish so far away from the action? I'm surprised to be here in this situation with thou. To introduce myself, we've been priests in Durham for generations. Not much to say, really. I like to look out at the ocean and pray for the people. Watch over them as a flock of sheep. I'm a very good listener, not much of a talker. If thou don't mind, maybe we could enjoy some silence with our own thoughts. We've some time, don't we?"
Well played, priest, that sounds very fine. Although, if thou don't mind, maybe one more question for the time. They say the king's of curved stature. What thou make of that, priest?
'Tis his spine, my lady. Chapter 2. Some time after Durham they'd stopped for the night, now a day later. Still the same slow grind, the two travellers tired.
Would have been better to walk,
suddenly quipped Lady of Berwickshire, rocking in her seat. Yes, not the most comfortable arrangement, although it does cut down on the exercise. Thou were saying something about a scandal?
Yes, priest, a scandal. Not long ago my parents arranged for me to marry an Englishman, recently moved to our county. I grew up near Berwick upon Tweed. That's why I'm the Lady of Berwickshire. And, as thou know, we live on the border, well now in England. Grew up with lots of Scottish boys. Fell in love with a Scottish boy. The family knew about it. They split us up. Engaged me to an Englishman. Only
what?
I'm with child, priest.
The Lady of Berwickshire and thy child. Thy child and the father's a Scottish boy that thy family stands firm against, while engaged in an arranged marriage with an Englishman. Thy family sits very prominent in thy village, my lady.
Yes. Word got to the king. He sent for me himself. Seems he arranged this carriage ride with me and thou as the only two passengers.
Well, we should speak to each other freely. I will guard thy baby with my life.
Thank thou, priest.
Chapter 3. Another day after a stop at night. Same slow grind. Only the carriage stops and lurches forward. Lady of Berwickshire with her back to the coachman stayed seated, while the priest almost fell to the floor. "All right, sire," yelled the coachman. "Yes, coachman, the young lady is well. Have we found our fate?" "Mind stepping out, sire? And the maiden. The doorman will help thee out." Outside, they could see the problem. A wheel had sunk in the mud, injuring some of the horses during the abrupt end of momentum. Both the priest and the Lady of Berwickshire had mud on their feet. "Can we do anything, coachman?" asked the priest. "Walk, sire. 'Tis the only thing to do. For get to York thou must with much ado. If thou take this letter with thee, safe passage into the city thou will find, and much peace of mind, after the dark forest around the bend." "Dark forest?" asked the priest. "Yes, the dark forest. 'Fraid sometimes there's trouble there. Only walk the road from here. Don't wander off like prey. Mind to York, and don't stray." "Thou won't accompany us, strangers to this land? Coachman, thee know where to go better than we." "Would like to, sire, yes indeed. Only me and the doorman, thou see. We need to get this carriage fixed. Yes, we do. Maybe we'll catch up to thou, only not too far off. Don't thou fear. York is near." And so the priest and the Lady of Berwickshire began to walk along the road. Only to where, they did not know. Chapter 4. They walked a ways down the road, around the bend, and into the dark forest. Almost instantly, darkness fell upon them. They could scarcely see the road, only from the sunlight atop tall, opaque trees, and they walked some more. "Halt!" The two stopped in their tracks, and only then realized a man standing in front of them. At first he seemed to have no head, only broad shoulders. Then they could see the hunchback. "Do thou have any money or food?" "No," said the priest. A priest and a young maiden, walking through the dark forest with no money or food. Liars!
"'Tis young lady, actually," said the Lady of Berwickshire.
"Thee!"
And the hunchback pushed the lady.
"She's with child!"
And the priest shoved the hunchback. He fell and hit his head on a rock, and died. The two stood there in wonder of what had just happened. The priest then knelt and said some prayers for the hunchback, and the two began to walk again, stunned. Not long after the sea of trees parted, York dazzled in the sunlight, shining bright, flags and banners at full mast, a city larger than any they'd ever seen, and none so grand. The two heard a noise. Then the carriage appeared minus 2 horses. It stopped next to them, and the coachman looked down. "Did thou make it here safe? Any troubles?" To which the priest replied, "Killed a hunchback, although no fault of mine. Pushed him away from the young lady, and he fell. Knocked his head for a spell of dreary night from which none see light." The doorman opened the door to the carriage, the two went in, and the horses pulled them into the house of York. Chapter 5. Although York impressed with size and space, it lacked heart and depth. The two didn't feel comfort. Only now they had parted ways. The Lady of Berwickshire had been assigned to quarters, while the priest stayed in the church. The priest stayed in the church for a day before being summoned to meet with King Richard III. Upon being led into a reception room, he saw the Lady of Berwickshire being led from another door at the end of the hall. The two passed each other without acknowledging each other. When the priest went through the second door, he could see the king sitting on a throne at the end of the hallway with the crown of England upon his head. The king motioned him to continue walking, with no display of his curved stature. When he got to within speaking distance, the priest knelt as commanded.
"Rise, priest. 'Tis been told that thee killed a hunchback on the road to York." "Yes, my majesty." "This hunchback attacked the Lady of Berwickshire, did he not?" "Yes, my majesty." "I see. Well, that's interesting. I'd like thee to join my court, priest. We are preparing to defend this kingdom. We aim to end the Wars of Roses."
Chapter 6. Easter Sunday, April 3rd, 1485, 6 days before the 1-year anniversary of the death of King Richard III's son. The court resided in York, where the priest from Durham spent most of his time in the king's presence. The priest guarded his thoughts with his life, after the recent death of King Richard III's wife, and with no heir, sought a new wife. King Richard III defied all descriptions about him. No one ever mentioned his missing nephews, nor his curved stature, actually difficult to detect. He commanded great respect. He controlled the court and all who followed. He sensed every whisper. The king remained tuned to all of Lady Berwickshire's needs. He boasted about his conquest of Scotland in 1482. He claimed responsibility for Berwickshire's incorporation into England, a fact. And he thought of a trustworthy companion for her, in a priest from Durham, close to her home to know some custom, far enough south to be rightfully English, and her Scottish boy, not much of a boy at all, rather a potential heir to the throne of Scotland. Richard III preferred Scotland more friend than foe, so he kept Lady of Berwickshire safe within his reach to quell a possible revolt. And he kept a keen interest in conversations with the priest, with whom he hoped would reveal secrets from the northeast. A great listener, not much of a talker, a priest from Durham, a small parish away from the action. Now he felt a ship in a violent gale far from the coast.
Only during his visits with the Lady of Berwickshire did he dare to capture some semblance of his old self, and preach honest counsel. These meetings arranged on Sundays in accordance with the king's command. A very festive Easter indeed, and a feast soon to be had. And yet thou look sad, my lady, and only a priest can understand. Yet pester thou I will not command, on this day so holy and grand, said the priest, now that they were alone in the church garden.
Thanks, priest. Only I'm not afraid to admit I miss my mom and dad, my brothers, and the others, after so many Easter morning services together. And although York's church may shame our own, 'tis so far away from home, something I can't condone, especially with a child on the way, and no husband with whom to stay.
Yes, young lady, I read thou true, only please don't feel so blue. So today as when we first met, let's not talk of thou. Instead, let's recall our duty here and the man who holds us both so dear. Recently his wife passed not long after his only begotten son. Now with no heir, and danger so near, he wishes to find another wife. 'Tis caused a stir among the court, their souls murmur to me. Only none will speak freely, as thou could just imagine.
Has he gone mad?
Young lady, please don't speak his name, for if he's gone insane we might meet the fate his nephews met, when on starry night no one ever heard their breath again.
Yes, priest, I'm young. I've never been naive, no matter how outspoken. I'll keep these thoughts to myself with no mention in the letters I write. We don't want to give ourselves a fright. So please, let me cry on thy shoulder, for there's pain within me that needs to be released before we feast.
Yes, child, and for thy child, please unburden thyself, for we must maintain thine health. And tonight we'll feast, and be merry, for the king wishes to win glory. Sour apples can be thrown away, only friendly roses are allowed to stay. Easter dinner in the king's court left no belly unfilled, no matter a hardened heart. With Jesus allowed to live in heaven, all the sheep could sleep with wolves beside them. Chapter 7. The next day after the war ministers left, the king bid the priest to stay. After Easter service and before the feast, I witnessed a scene in the church garden. Lady of Berwickshire cried on thy shoulder. Did she reveal a plot? A plot, my majesty? Why, yes, a plot of England's demise. A Scottish surprise attack along the border. Knights killing my loyal servants as they look to God for help with their king blind to the threat of their lives. No, my majesty, Lady of Berwickshire has not revealed such a plot, nor does it seem to hide in her conscience, the guilt of which might overwhelm a girl of her age so far from home. She'd known that such a game would only lead to her death, along with the child inside. That, my liege, burdens thou, and the Lady of Berwickshire. So there's no news from the Durham Red Rose that must hide in the countryside? No such news, my king. We are only for the White Rose and the House of York. Our loyalty must have no doubt from one as powerful as thou. We follow in thine footsteps that lead to Jesus, as thou art our Lord on earth, with no equal in our hearts or minds. That's good to hear, and I believe thee, I do, for 'tis not like a priest to lie. And so I must warn thee, Henry Tudor's filthy and evil. He's trying to usurp the throne, for which he's no rightful claim. Feel free to call him insane. No worries, for I shall protect thee, and the Lady of Berwickshire, along with all my subjects. This threat must come to an end, so all can live peacefully in England. Chapter 8. As a priest in King Richard III's court,
He knew not to make eye contact with the people who came and went. With his back against a wall, and looking to the ground, he did his best to say prayers in order to keep God close. His one colleague in court, the Archbishop. He served the Archbishop faithfully, and thanked God that the Archbishop did not compromise him by talking of politics. Instead, the two shared the same faith, and when a priest be called in court, the Archbishop would answer the call as the position required, allowing the priest to pray Ordo Commendationis Animae, while standing in the shadows. He watched the court with a distant interest. The excited environment held no place in his memories. Yet, for all the intrigue, he still missed the sea, and the sound of the waves crashing on the beach.
"Send dispatch to the Duke of Norfolk,"
said the king.
"Tell him Henry Tudor's the devil in disguise, his true intent in his flaming eyes, killing Englishmen with foreign troops to drink their blood like French wine. We will crush him so long as we remain together locked in brotherly arms, for evil never wins over good. We have no sins in God's eyes. Only a marauding usurper like Henry Tudor can fear the judgment of God."
The priest, in the shadows of the court, allowed his soul to sigh. For all must fear God, for all have sinned. And what if the king had murdered children for the sake of power? 'Tis a sin that cannot be forgiven. After the king's proclamation, he rushed off to some violent sport. Some in the court followed, while most stayed behind and began to murmur their silent whine. And of all these men, one found a place at the priest's side, and began a conversation. "Are thee a priest, or are thee the king's pet? Take no offence, for we are not well met. For I am the same as thee, my friend. A prisoner here to keep a sword in its sheath. I'm Lord Stanley, and we've both heard the speech, although we might have differing views. For I've heard that Henry Tudor's an honest man. All should be glad when his feet touch English soil again. What thee make of that, priest?" "'Tis true, I'm a priest as thou say. A pet, maybe some would see it that way. However, my dealings are not with that of man. I talk to God when I can. So if thou please, don't make me sway, for loyal to the White Rose I must stay." "Don't worry, Heavenly Father, I mean no harm. Only to give thee some other form of speech for thee to digest while thee pray. The day's not far away when we'll all see the light, so bright, it will make us close our eyes, and for the first time in years, truly be happy inside. This child murderer cannot continue to rule such an island as our own. So when the day comes, please sit aside and pray. Things will turn out better that way." "Don't fret over a lowly man like me, with no arms to rise in a quest for power and glory. I sit and abide the laws of the land, no matter the man."
Chapter 9. The next day, after a meeting in the court, the king asked the priest to report. "Dear priest, what say thee? Any trembles among the court? Please be smart. I don't wish to feel as someone thee can't confide in. So please be bold, and reveal whispers as shouts to ears that may have missed them." "'Tis true, my lord, I confess. Lord Stanley made a strange request. He asked that I abide when Henry Tudor takes a crown and unifies the kingdom, a Red Rose's domain." "Lord Stanley? Yes, I know. He's got secret plans for my fall. This will all turn out all right. They are at my side. We will do something with the traitor later. For now, we must make haste, as I'd like to take thee to a place nearby where I find relaxation, away from the crowds of loyal supporters among our faction." And away the priest went at the king's side, and away to a river in the woods nearby, here surrounded by hounds and loyal men. The king took a bottle of wine and handed it to the priest. "Drink," said the king. "My vows, my majesty." "Drink." And so the priest drank some wine. The hate in the gulp he did mind. It disappeared with the king grabbing his hair and jerking his head around. "Vows, priest? Ha! For a second I thought they might drink the entire bottle of French wine, a gift from their king. We may get Henry Tudor before he returns to our land, so this can be said to be our communion. We are now friends, brothers even. Thee shall wear a pendant of the white boar. Now, let's find a beast to feed the mouths that preach discontent, the burdens of a king. All are loyal to the crown, although not always loyal to the man." And as the king raised his bow, his curved stature became distinct for the first time. Yet the priest didn't mind, for it showed a flaw in the man, a flaw he did not fear to share. And so the priest stared. Richard III lowered the bow, took the wine bottle back from the priest, and took a gulp. "'Tis my spine, priest. I came upon a sickness in my younger years that nearly took my life, literally twisting in agony. I declared to God that if he let me live, I'd rule England as a gift to him. I struggled and rose from my sick bed, only with a curve in my back, and discomfort that no man I've known other than those injured in battle can describe. I took it as new strength, would not let it become a weakness, and, from that moment on, practiced my combat skills with a vigor no one could match." The king took another gulp of wine and handed the bottle back to the priest. He raised the bow again. A proud heart stood across the river. With the release of the bowstring, an arrow flew true and straight. Then the heart staggered, falling to the ground. Some of the men gave a cheer. The king smiled big and broad. And for the first time, the priest from Durham felt good in his company. Chapter 10. The next day at court, all went on as before. Only the king stood up while the Earl of Surrey talked, and then the king yelled, "Stop! Priest, come hither." The entire room froze. The priest felt awoken from a deep slumber. A chill ran down his spine. His eyes scanned for the archbishop and instead met the king's gaze. "Priest, come hither." The priest jerked his leg out with an effort, then forced another step before he began to glide across the room, as if out of his body, and suddenly kneeling at the king's feet. "Rise, priest. To all my subjects, before thee stands the priest of Durham. Don't let his lowly cleric title fool thee. He happens to be one of the most powerful sorcerers in all the kingdom. As most of thee know, and for those who do not, the priest of Durham killed a hunchback in the dark forest in order to save Lady of Berwickshire and her child, Scotland's future king. He's been watching all of thee for me. He knows all. He sees all. And from now on he will stand at my side during our meetings. What do thee make of that?" "Yes, your majesty, we recognize the priest of Durham," the entire room echoed. "Priest, stand over here." And the king pointed to a place to the side of his throne. The priest walked there with his head down, and then turned to face the crowd. They all stared at him. "Continue," the king simply said, and the Earl of Surrey began again, from where he'd left off. Chapter 11. Sunday, after church, the priest met the Lady of Berwickshire in the garden. She began to show signs of her condition with a bump in her belly. The priest looked at her happily. "Child, only thou cannot be a child, thou must be a lady. The Lady of Berwickshire. Thou know the responsibility to rule. and just the other day the king stopped court to make me a special envoy at his side. What am I to do, Lady of Berwickshire?"
"Oh my God, did he really?"
And the lady started laughing. "Yes. Although I enjoy thy light spirit, my life depends on it. What am I to do?"
The lady smiled and said, "Thou fit the character perfect, priest. Thou take pride in listening, and thou don't talk a lot. So thou must listen closely to all that's said, and when asked, say what God hears, only in a way that's constructive to the discussion, just like thou always do. Did the king say anything else about thou?"
"He gave me the title Priest of Durham, and said I'm a sorcerer."
"A sorcerer?" A little giggle.
"The most powerful sorcerer in all the kingdom." They both laughed for a while.
"Get something with a hood, like the cloaks the monks wear. Make sure to keep thy face in the shadows," said the Lady of Berwickshire. And so the priest did. Chapter 12. The next day the priest made it to court earlier than he normally did. He stood where the king had designated, his hood shadowing his face, the long cloak hiding his body, and a pendant of the white boar covering his heart. When the king walked in, the priest could see him hesitate for a moment. Only a moment. And the king walked in and sat in his throne. He summoned for the Earl of Surrey. The Earl stopped and stared at the priest. The priest stared back into the Earl of Surrey's eyes, knowing he could not see the priest's face. "Speak," the king said. "Speak. Well, my majesty." And the Earl of Surrey looked again at the priest. The priest stared back. "Speak," the king said, and the Earl of Surrey went on as he would normally do. "King, the Sheriff of Wiltshire has asked for additional funding for preparations in the event of invasion." "The Sheriff of Wiltshire? He's far too north, and we've been through this before. He's fat and lazy, must be drinking wine with maidens and feasting evermore with slobs of soldiers. No, make a small cut in his funding, tell him to harden up for war, lest he be sacrificed to the French hordes that will loot his stores before I can assist him." "It shall be done, my lord." "Are there any requests from subjects closer to the southern shoreline? Any sort of request? Food, soldiers, gold?" "No, my king." The king had planned the defence of England from a Henry Tudor invasion since Buckingham's rebellion. When all of the reports had been made, and dispatches sent out, the king said, "Priest, I like the monkhood. That must be a suggestion of the Lady of Berwickshire. Things are going really well since the two of thee joined my court. God seems determined to bless us." And court continued like that for some time. Chapter 13. Summer solstice, almost 2 years ago, Richard III's nephews had been declared illegitimate children, thus forfeiting any hereditary rights to royalty. King Richard III given the crown from rightful claims on both his father's and mother's family trees. The king now held court in Nottingham Castle, while the Duke of Norfolk and the Earl of Northumberland maintained armies in the field. No one spoke of London. The priest wore his cloak and white boar pendant over his heart every day at the king's side. The hood not only shielded his eyes now, it shielded his sweat from the summer heat and the intensity of war plans. The threat of Henry Tudor had increased after recent news from France where he stated his intentions to marry Elizabeth of York. Elizabeth of York, Richard III's niece and sister to the missing princes, had been dismissed from court. However, the king kept account of her at private daily meetings that the priest did not attend.
nor were any members of the court present. The suggestion of marriage between Henry Tudor and Elizabeth of York aroused pride in everyone. They were a natural fit, unifying the House of Lancaster with the House of York, a cross-pollination of the red rose and the white rose. Only King Richard III became agitated. Military commanders looked for court advantages to secure important appointments. Lord Stanley had served alongside Richard III in the Scotland campaign of 1482. The memories of their success created trust in affairs related to warfare. The stepfather of his rival Henry Tudor, Lord Stanley gave valuable information to Richard III. His confession to the priest made him a suspected conspirator in a plot to overthrow the current monarch. "Your Majesty," Lord Stanley announced to the court, "allow me to use my military experience along the southern shores of England. If Henry Tudor dares to claim the hand of Elizabeth of York, he must sail north from France, where he lives in comfort with their king." "If Henry Tudor were to claim a hand, he should claim his own, before it becomes severed from the arm. If he lives in comfort, then 'tis for his own harm. For me and the King of France see eye to eye, as only our rank can allow." "Yes, your Majesty," said Lord Stanley. "Still, the southern shore should be where he'd have to sail if he were to mount an attack on thee." "Thee mean, if he were to invade England's sovereign ground with looting drunk Frenchmen, debauched mercenaries from the Holy Land? Lord Stanley, thee should stand thy ground, for we are in a fight, and they seem to waver so." "My Majesty, allow me to interrupt," said Viscount Lovell. "I too served with thou in the row for Scotland. Let me serve for thou now, for I will lead the troops south and protect the shores from sea debris. We all recall Henry Tudor's failed attempt to land ashore during the Buckingham Rebellion. I feel confident Henry Tudor will meet his end on the rocks, as a priest of Durham ended a hunchback so vile as to hurt a child. If something does wash ashore, we'll make sure it will no more." "Viscount Lovell, I like the way thy words encourage me. Thee shall be sent south to defend our countrymen from French aggression, guised in a traitor's name." "It shall be done, my lord." "If I'm not to be put to thy advantage, allow me to retire, my Majesty," said Lord Stanley, "for I've many lands granted to me from thou that need attending, and this war could continue forever." "Lord Stanley, I respect thy position, and cannot deny thy request, to force neglect of some of our richest farmlands. Thee may go. Although, please leave thy son Lord Strange with me. As Chamberlain of Chester and North Wales, they command coastline. Yet, as a stranger to this court, they cannot defend. Leave thy son in thy place to respond to requests from threats that might come our way." "Thou seem paranoid, my Majesty. What threat could I pose to thou, or Henry Tudor so far north? Thy wisdom prevails Henry Tudor can barely set his ships to sail, much more to navigate such a treacherous shoreline. Let me bring my son with me. It will be no trouble to thou. Lord Strange can help me farm." "Oh, I insist to keep his company. And as your Majesty, I ask that thee obey, or do thee intend to betray thy oath to me?" "My king, please do not speak nonsense. 'Tis only a love of a father for his son, as on summer nights in his youth when I would call him for dinner." "Well then, thee can go. Only allow me to commit Viscount Lovell to the protection of the English people, of which thee are their vassal." "Finally, they have broken the pact of the cat, the rat, and Lovell our dog," someone in court bellowed. "Who said that?" demanded King Richard III. The court shuffled, revealing a staggering man with wine on his breath. "Sir Henry Stafford, thee are to be executed at once." Bloody hell! Thee killed thy nephew. He got stopped from the pop of the bailiff's baton. If I were a cat, I'd be curious to know a little more about our foe, said Sir William Catesby. If I were a rat, I'd rummage through the trash to find a letter of treasonous plots, said Sir Richard Ratcliffe. And then the Earl of Surrey announced the meeting adjourned, and called Viscount Lovell away like an obedient dog. Chapter 14. July 1485, and almost 2 years since a rescue attempt to save Richard III's nephews from the Tower of London. They'd not been seen since. Henry Tudor's challenge for the throne gained legitimacy as the young princes became believed dead, and his marriage proposal to Elizabeth of York, a rallying cry for those who wished to hear the wedding bell ring. And on Sunday, after church service in the garden, the priest met the Lady of Berwickshire.
"Hello, priest. It pleases me to see thou once again."
"Yes, my lady. 'Tis nice to have a familiar from a time and place away from here."
"As when we met, I have a scandal to tell, only we don't have some time, and so make plain this tale of woe. I've made a kinship with Viscount Lovell's wife. She made a discovery after her husband and Lord Stanley left. A letter, addressed to her from Lord Stanley. Strange. What she read revealed to her Richard III's intention to marry Elizabeth of York. How ghastly! She's his niece, and her brother's, well—" "A tale of woe indeed, my lady, as so many told during our short stay at court. And what are we to do, me and thou? If only God would let us be so smart." "I see thee pray to God, priest, much ado, and if thee would look to me for guidance," said Sir Richard Ratcliffe, pleased to see they'd been caught off guard. "Sir, we've never met. I'm the Lady of Berwickshire. How much have thou overheard, and how does it offend thee?"
"My lady, I'm only a servant of the court, a great friend to his majesty. This tale of woe must be heard. I mean no harm to thou, for we are all white roses. Yet mutiny in the ranks could be at hand, as Henry Tudor looks to land on the shores for a rose and a wedding bell." "I trust thou, Sir Richard Ratcliffe," said the priest of Durham, and they all felt all right, only they did not delight in this awkward situation. And so the knight left in flight to some destination.
"Oh, priest, can I confess? To pray to God we get out of this mess. And so, if we do, I'd like thou to know that marry the Scottish boy would be where I want to go. Red roses or white roses, any rose can have my heart," cried the Lady of Berwickshire.
Chapter 15. The next day court began as usual. The Earl of Surrey discussed recent news with Richard III, then, at an appropriate pause as if staged, "My Majesty the King, if I might have a word as a most loyal subject?" asked Sir Richard Ratcliffe. "Why, certainly, most loyal knight," said the King. "Sir Richard Ratcliffe, thou may command the court," said the Earl of Surrey. "It has come to my nose that a letter to spark mutiny has been sent. This betrayal might anger thou, my majesty. A tale of woe to endeavour the common man with a new demand. A red rose conspiracy." "'Tis this so? And who would have such a plan? And what could possibly swell the common ocean of man to rise up and wave me away?" "Lord Stanley, before he left, sent a dispatch that we did intercept. It told of a love, a secret kept, that my majesty now engaged to Elizabeth of York, after the tragic death of her majesty the queen, so recently. This new contract most would disagree." "Yes, my majesty," spoke Sir William Catesby. "As a most loyal servant my heart does sway, for to marry thy niece there's just no way." "Marry my niece?" said Richard III, still seated. "Well now, that's preposterous." A nervous laugh among the court. "I trust thee, Sir Richard Ratcliffe and Sir William Catesby, as loyal servants to the court. Thy evaluation that such a marriage would cause a mutiny seems founded, rightfully so. The English people might feel the Lord mocks them. In fact, I've been trying to find a suitor. There's one available in the future King of Portugal. If I marry his cousin of a fairer brand, a merry kingdom we could have again. The dispatch to the current King of Portugal happened to be well received. A new trade contract for shipping to the Mediterranean almost in hand. Great riches to all that live in England." A genuine cheer from the court. King Richard III a good sport. All felt glad that a solution to the problem had answered questions no one could ask. "Lord Strange, what have thee to say to these charges?" asked the Earl of Surrey. "The sounds of conspiracy, if thee sent this letter to me. Only it came from thy father before he left. 'Tis it not a strange request?" "Yes, your honour, the Earl of Surrey. This letter continues to puzzle me. White Rose, as Chamberlain to Chester, North Wales. This would cause mutiny in my men who would then wish to overthrow me. Why my father would put me in harm's way, I cannot begin to tell thee. My king," said Lord Strange. "Who shall I marry, priest of Durham? Elizabeth of York, or a princess of Portugal? Speak prophecy," said Richard III. "Neither, my majesty. Thou should mourn thy wife and child. The grief has overcome thou and clouded thy decisions. Thou need to grieve, my lord. Thou need to hail, my lord. For don't we always say, 'Long live the king'? This war only complicates things for thou. If thou must vanquish Henry Tudor, then let God's will be done. Then wait before finding love again." These words came from the priest of Durham's heart. The court heard the soothing tone of one delivering a sermon to a small parish by the sea. Chapter 16. On August 2nd, news had travelled fast that Henry Tudor began his sail from France. Then, over a week later, as the court all met in Nottingham Castle, the Earl of Surrey explained, "My Majesty, Henry Tudor walks on English soil." "Henry Tudor walks on English soil that burns his feet to the bones, do you tell me?" "No such report, my king, only a story that I must tell thou. He landed close to his birthplace in Wales, where Rhys ap Thomas remains employed after the Buckingham Rebellion." "Yes, I remember him, my majesty," said Sir William Catesby. "We sent for his son to hold like Lord Strange, only this arrangement could not be arranged. He said he could only be held in conscience of his service to thou." "Yes, that's the clue," said Sir Richard Ratcliffe. "He's held on oath that if he were to meet danger he must obey to slay a beach-hound, or betray, to invoke the dragon to walk over his yellow belly with no harm." "Yes, 'tis so, I remember," said Richard III. "Yet this report from the Earl of Surrey runs to the contrary. What do they make of this, my most trusted adviser?" The Earl of Surrey then replied, "My Majesty, this report cannot be denied, only in question remains the fact. Did Henry Tudor cross over the bridge while stood below Rhys ap Thomas, or did Rhys ap Thomas actually lie on his back for a foot to overstep his big fat yellow belly?" "Traitor!" yelled Sir William Catesby. "He must be executed, my lord," screamed Sir Richard Ratcliffe. "'Tis true," said the king. "What thee make of it, Lord Strange? As Chamberlain of Chester in northern Wales, for this betrayal appears in Wales while thy father's away from court." "Nothing, your majesty, a jest," laughed Lord Strange. "Something's amiss?" suspected the priest of Durham. "Imprison Lord Strange at once, as we look to uncover a conspiracy that threatens all of us. And please call Lord Stanley to me," stated King Richard III. Chapter 17. Dog Days of August. Another day in court. The Earl of Surrey then made a report to booze and proclamations of murder. "My king, Henry Tudor, marches toward thee, gaining forces as he goes. No one knows to what his number will swell. Only people guess everyone from here to Pembrokeshire." "And Lord Stanley, when will he stand his ground?" demanded the king. "He's sick, my lord, and cannot travel to court." "For the love of God, when will the madness end?" "For the true heir on God's appointment arrived already, in the throne with the crown. Can't these peasants see their folly? Don't they learn of their majesty's grace? When on Sunday morning the parents lead their children to say the prayer?" "Yes, my lord," said the Earl of Surrey. "Thou wilt not find me hiding in a tree," said Sir William Catesby. "Nor will I crawl with flies in the sewer," said Sir Richard Ratcliffe. "Then we shall settle it. A horse! A horse! My kingdom for a horse!" enthused Richard III. "Tell the Duke of Norfolk, the Earl of Northumberland, and Viscount Lovell to follow me. For now we must march to the Wars of Roses song that long play for roughly 30 years, since Henry V heard the cry of a country mourning him, and his infant son could not lead his men. We play the last note to that funeral dirge." Chapter 18. August 21st, 1485, St. James' Church in Sutton Chaney. The priest of Durham performed a special mass for members of the court, and said Richard III's personal prayer. "Lord Jesus Christ, deign to free thy servant King Richard from every tribulation, sorrow, and trouble in which he finds himself. Hear the King, in the name of all thy goodness, for which we give thanks, and for all the gifts granted to the King, because thou made him from nothing, and redeemed him out of thy bounteous love and pity from eternal damnation to promising eternal life." After the service, and before the army moved on to Ambion Hill to set up camp, in the respite, the priest of Durham met the Lady of Berwickshire, who would stay behind in Sutton Chaney. The Lady of Berwickshire took the priest by the hand, her belly bursting with baby. "I've heard a rumour on the wind that Henry Tudor's around the bend. A battle will happen tomorrow. So please, be safe, priest. Think of this child I carry as the next priest of Durham." "Thank thou, my lady. Only I'd like to see thou get married. I'll do what I can to stay out of the fray. God's my only fear. We are safe among men, as long as we don't allow them to take our place in heaven." "Oh, priest, I'm about to cry. We are well met. Thou may preside over my wedding vows. We only need to get out of this mess. Then to Berwick upon Tweed we will go." "Yes, my lady, say 'tis so. I've never meant to travel that far north. With thou at my side, we shall fly, as if angel wings move us to thy home. Once safe, we can plan eternal love between thou and a Scottish prince, and a legitimate child to the throne." The last chapter. 3 armies met at Bosworth Field. The belligerents, Henry Tudor via France, Lord Stanley Kingmaker, and Richard III, King of England. Henry Tudor on horseback in the sunlight. Everyone could hear him call out across the battlefield, "'Tis his spine, brothers!" All the armies erupted in laughter. The crown of England rested on Richard III's head. He called the priest to his side. The priest left Lord Strange in restraints and rode on horseback to the king. They surveyed Bosworth Field. It became obvious that all had lost their lust for killing. All the king's men wished for a rightful heir. For Henry Tudor, Camelot could be realized with a marriage to Elizabeth of York. Richard III had already lost Camelot when his nephews, Prince Edward and Prince Richard, disappeared, and his son, the Prince of Wales, and his wife, the Queen of England, died. King Richard III ordered the Earl of Surrey to attack. He got injured and his company retreated. He then ordered Sir Richard Ratcliffe to lead an attack where he met his death. The men in Richard III's army became nervous as Henry Tudor taunted them from across Bosworth Field. He looked at Sir William Catesby and did not feel motivated. Then he looked at Viscount Lovell and thought he'd rather die with this man at his side. Finally, the king looked at the Duke of Norfolk. His son, the Earl of Surrey, had already been injured. He remained Richard III's most loyal servant. He respected his leadership, bravery, and prowess in combat. Nearly 3 years ago, Richard III had just been Richard, Duke of Gloucester. And then he led the assault to capture the castle at Berwick-upon-Tweed. That victory vindicated his faith in God. He knew he would become king. He looked at the Duke of Norfolk and felt his faith in victory for England. "Duke of Norfolk, come hither." The Duke of Norfolk rode on horseback to the king's position, opposite the priest. "Perform a flanking maneuver with cavalry from that high ground, away from Lord Stanley's army. Their infantry position cannot be reinforced there. If we can break through, we can rout them." "It will be done, my lord." The Duke of Norfolk then rode on horseback to the company that would follow him into battle. When ready, the cavalry charged downhill at the infantry position. One of Henry Tudor's soldiers raised a bow and arrow. He let loose the savage quiver. It struck the Duke of Norfolk dead. His cavalry scattered. The assault halted as Henry Tudor jeered. Richard III then signalled the Earl of Northumberland, who stood at the front, to charge across Bosworth Field. The Earl of Northumberland ignored the order. The priest alerted Richard III of Henry Tudor's position, being exposed on Bosworth Field, and said, "Thou can end this war with thy bow, my majesty." "That's no way to end the Wars of Roses, priest. That's why I'm the King of England. I'm going to ride my horse over there, cut Henry Tudor's head off and put it on a stick. To glory, to honour, to England." Then the king galloped away on his horse. "To God," the priest said to himself. He watched as the horses in King Richard III's retinue became bogged down in the mud, like quicksand, and continued to watch in horror as Lord Stanley led a charge to overtake Richard III. The nightmare only ended when Rhys ap Thomas struck a death blow with a poleaxe to the white boar, soon to have no grave. The priest mourned the butchery. Sometime after the Battle of Bosworth Field, the army recommended the priest of Durham for a commendation because of his help to depose King Richard III. He had, after all, told Richard III to charge across Bosworth Field, knowing he would get trapped in the mud. The priest declined, declaring God's will. He later went to Berwick-upon-Tweed, where he married the Lady of Berwickshire to her Scottish boy, with permission from Henry VII. We hope you enjoyed this presentation of Red Roses by Cyrus Emerson. This book was read by Kira Omans. Copyright 2018 by Cyrus Emerson. Special thanks to the Richard III Society. Long live the King.